The machines beeped steadily in the ICU as I held my father's weathered hand. At 78, Robert Collins Sr. had built an empire from nothing, a small construction company that grew into a multimillion-dollar real estate business. But empires don't matter when you're watching your hero take his final breaths. "Promise me something, son," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the ventilator. "Take care of your sister. And remember what your mother and I always taught you. Family comes first. Always." I squeezed his hand, tears streaming down my face. "I promise, Dad." He smiled weakly. "The will. It's fair. Equal shares. That's how it should be. You and Emily. You're both our legacy." Those were among his last coherent words. Emily arrived 20 minutes after he passed, her designer heels clicking against the hospital floor. She'd been in Paris on a shopping trip, too busy to return earlier despite my desperate calls. As she looked down at our father's still form, I expected tears, remorse, something human. Instead, she checked her Rolex. "When's the will reading?" she asked. That should have been my first warning. Growing up, Emily was the golden child. Straight A's, prom queen, full scholarship to Harvard Business School. While I struggled through community college and worked construction with Dad, she was conquering Wall Street, making more money at 25 than most people see in a lifetime. But success changed her. Or maybe it just revealed who she really was. She visited home twice a year, always with expensive gifts and stories about her penthouse apartment, her European vacations, her influential friends. Mom and Dad were proud, of course, but I saw the distance growing. Emily had transcended our small-town roots and wanted everyone to know it. When Mom got sick with cancer 3 years ago, Emily sent flowers and checks. I moved back home, quit my job, and became a full-time caregiver. For 18 months, I held Mom's hand through chemotherapy, drove her to appointments, cleaned up when she couldn't make it to the bathroom. Emily visited twice. Once for Christmas, once for the funeral. "You're so good with this caregiving stuff," she told me at Mom's wake, adjusting her $3,000 black dress. "I could never do what you do. I'm just not built for this kind of thing." Dad was heartbroken after Mom passed. I stayed home, helped run the business, made sure he ate, took his medications, didn't drink too much. Emily called every Sunday, precisely at 2 p.m., for exactly 15 minutes. But apparently that was enough to earn equal inheritance rights. Attorney James Morrison had been the family lawyer for 30 years. He'd drawn up Dad's will, Mom's will, and handled all the business legal work. As Emily and I sat in his mahogany-paneled office, I felt confident about Dad's intentions. "Your father was very specific about his wishes," Morrison began, adjusting his glasses. "He wanted to ensure both his children were provided for equally." I nodded. That sounded like Dad. "However," Morrison continued, "there's been a development. Miss Collins, would you like to present your document?" Emily reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a manila envelope. "Dad called me 2 weeks before he died," she said, her voice steady. "He was concerned about Robert's stability. The drinking, the gambling, the debts he'd been hiding." My blood went cold. "What are you talking about?" She handed Morrison a document. Dad had a new will drawn up. He left the business and properties to me, with Robert receiving a small trust fund, enough to get his life together, but not enough to destroy everything Dad built. I stared at the papers Morrison was examining. "That's impossible. Dad never said anything about." "Dad protected you from the truth, Robert," Emily interrupted, her voice dripping with false concern. "But he told me everything. The gambling debts, the times you stole from the business accounts, the DUI you made him cover up. Every word was a lie, but she delivered them with such conviction that even Morrison looked at me with suspicion. "These are serious allegations," Morrison said carefully. "Robert, do you have any response?" "She's lying." I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "I never gambled, never stole anything, never had a DUI. Emily, how can you?" "The document appears legitimate," Morrison interrupted, examining the signatures. "It's notarized, witnessed, and follows proper legal protocol. Unless you have evidence to the contrary." I felt the room spinning. This couldn't be happening. Emily's expression was perfect. Sad, reluctant, burdened by her brother's failures. "I know this is hard to accept, Robert, but Dad wanted what was best for you. The trust fund will give you $50,000 a year. That's enough to start over. Get help, maybe find a purpose. $50,000 a year. from an estate worth over $8 million. I'm contesting this, I said, my voice shaking. Emily sighed dramatically. I hoped it wouldn't come to that. But if you insist on fighting Dad's final wishes. She gathered her papers, stood up smoothly, and looked at me with what almost passed for sympathy. I'll see you in court, little brother. I spent my last savings hiring attorney Marcus Williams, a scrappy public defender who specialized in contested estates. When I told him the story, he leaned back in his creaky chair and shook his head. Family inheritance cases are ugly, he said. But this feels wrong. Tell me about your sister's finances. Over the next weeks, Marcus dug deep. What he found was shocking. Despite her successful Wall Street career, Emily was drowning in debt. The penthouse apartment, mortgaged to the hilt. The designer clothes, expensive vacations, luxury car, all financed with credit cards and loans. She was living a carefully constructed lie, spending far more than she earned to maintain an image of success. She needs this inheritance, Marcus explained. Without it, she'll lose everything within months. But proving the will was forged would be nearly impossible. The signatures looked legitimate. The witnesses were real. A nurse and a social worker who claimed they'd seen Dad sign the document in the hospital. Then Marcus found our secret weapon. Your father had Parkinson's disease, he said, reviewing medical records. The later stages affected his fine motor control. But look at this signature, it's too steady, too perfect. Nobody with advanced Parkinson's could write like this. We had our case. The courtroom was packed on the day of the trial. Word had spread through our small town about the Collins family scandal. The grieving son versus the successful daughter, fighting over their father's millions. Emily arrived looking like $1 million in a conservative navy suit. Her hair perfectly styled. Every inch the grieving daughter protecting her father's legacy. She'd hired Thompson, Phillips and Associates, the most expensive law firm in the state. I sat with Marcus in my only good suit, the one I'd worn to both parents' funerals. The first day didn't go well for us. Emily's witnesses were convincing. The nurse, Janet Coleman, testified that she'd helped Dad sign important papers just days before his death. He was weak but lucid, she said. He specifically mentioned wanting to protect the business from his son's problems. The social worker corroborated her story. Even Morrison testified that the will appeared legitimate when Emily presented it. But then it was our turn. Marcus called Dr. Sarah Chun, Dad's neurologist, to the stand. Mr. Collins was in stage 4 Parkinson's disease at the time of his alleged signature, she testified. His hand tremors were severe, and his fine motor control was significantly impaired. The signature on this document shows none of the characteristic irregularities we'd expect. Emily's lawyer objected, but the damage was building. Next, Marcus presented financial records showing Emily's desperate situation. The mounting debts, the foreclosure notices, the maxed-out credit cards. The defendant had a clear financial motive to fabricate this will, Marcus argued. But the breakthrough came on day 3. Marcus had discovered something Emily's expensive lawyers had missed. The hospital where Dad allegedly signed the new will had security cameras in every room. And while most footage was automatically deleted after 30 days, one camera's hard drive had malfunctioned, preserving weeks of recordings. The footage showed Emily entering Dad's room alone on the date in question. It showed her leaving 30 minutes later with a manila envelope. But most importantly, it showed that Dad was unconscious the entire time, heavily sedated for pain management. He never signed anything. When Marcus played the security footage in court, the room went silent. On the screen, we could see Emily sitting beside our unconscious father, carefully tracing his signature on a document, over and over, until she had it perfect. The gasps from the gallery were audible. Emily's face went white as she watched herself forge Dad's signature, her perfect composure finally cracking. Miss Collins, the judge said sternly, do you have any explanation for what we just witnessed? Emily's high-priced lawyer whispered urgently in her ear, but she wasn't listening. She was staring at the screen, watching her carefully constructed lie fall apart. She began, then stopped. Her hands were shaking now, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her in years. I needed it, she whispered. The courtroom erupted. The judge gavelled for order, but Emily was beyond caring about procedure now. Do you know what it's like? She said, her voice rising. To work 80 hours a week, to sacrifice everything for success, only to watch it all slip away? I built this perfect life, this perfect image, and I was losing it all. Tears were streaming down her face now. Real tears, not the manufactured ones she'd shown during her testimony. Robert got to be the good son. He got to stay home, to be loved, to be appreciated. I got to be the ATM. Send money for dad's medications. Send money for mom's treatments. Send money, but never get to just be a daughter. Her confession was devastating in its honesty. Years of resentment, jealousy, and financial pressure had corrupted the golden child our parents had been so proud of. I forged the will, she said, looking directly at me. I bribed the witnesses. I lied about everything, because I couldn't accept that the son who never left home deserved half of what I sacrificed everything to build. The judge called a recess, but the trial was effectively over. When court reconvened, Judge Margaret Foster, a 60-year-old woman who'd presided over family court for 20 years, looked older than her age. She'd clearly been affected by Emily's breakdown. In 30 years on the bench, she began, her voice heavy with emotion. I've seen families destroyed by greed, by jealousy, by the simple inability to love each other more than they love money. She looked at Emily, who sat slumped in her chair like a deflated balloon. Miss Collins, your confession has saved this court considerable time and your family further pain. The forged will is hereby declared null and void. Your father's original will, dividing the estate equally between his children, will stand. Emily didn't react. She seemed to be in shock. But Judge Foster wasn't finished. However, she continued, this case has revealed something deeper than simple fraud. It has revealed a family that forgot how to love each other. She turned to me, and I was surprised to see tears in her eyes. Mr. Collins, you are legally entitled to your full inheritance. But I want to tell you something I've learned in decades of family court. Money can't resurrect the dead, and it can't resurrect relationships. The judge paused, composing herself. Your sister will face criminal charges for fraud. She will likely serve prison time. Her career is over. Her reputation is destroyed. She has lost everything she worked for, everything she sacrificed for, everything she stole for. Emily finally looked up, her face streaked with mascara. But, Judge Foster continued, she's also lost something else. She's lost her brother. And from what I've observed in this courtroom, that may be the greatest tragedy of all. The judge's voice broke slightly, because the saddest thing about this case isn't the fraud or the money or even the lies. It's that two people who should have been each other's greatest comfort in grief became each other's greatest enemies. She wiped her eyes with a tissue. I'm ordering the inheritance to be distributed according to the original will. But I'm also strongly recommending that both of you seek family counseling before you lose each other forever. Because your parents didn't raise you to be adversaries. They raised you to be siblings. The gavel came down, but nobody moved. The entire courtroom was crying, the jury, the lawyers, the spectators in the gallery. Even the court reporter was wiping her eyes. Emily was arrested as she left the courthouse, led away in handcuffs while reporters shouted questions. She looked back at me once, and in her eyes I saw not the greedy, manipulative woman who had tried to steal my inheritance, but the scared little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. I wanted to hate her. I should have hated her. She'd betrayed everything our family stood for, dishonored our parents' memory, and tried to destroy me in the process. But all I felt was profound sadness. The inheritance was substantial, $4 million, plus the family business, plus several rental properties. More money than I'd ever dreamed of having. But it felt hollow without anyone to share it with. Emily pleaded guilty to fraud and forgery. She served 18 months in prison and was ordered to pay restitution for legal costs. Her Wall Street career was over, her reputation destroyed, her carefully constructed life in ruins. When she was released, she disappeared. No forwarding address, no contact information, no way to reach her even if I'd wanted to. 5 years later, a letter arrived at my office. No return address, postmark from somewhere in Montana. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in Emily's familiar handwriting. Robert, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. What I did was unforgivable, not just the fraud, but the years of treating you like you were less than me, like your sacrifices didn't matter. I've had a lot of time to think about what Judge Foster said. She was right. We lost each other, and that's a tragedy worse than any money. I'm working as a waitress now in a small town where nobody knows who I used to be. It's honest work, and for the first time in my adult life, I sleep peacefully at night. I loved our parents, Robert. Despite everything I did, despite how I dishonored their memory, I love them. And I love you too, even though I spent years being too proud and too stupid to show it. I know it's too late for us. I know I destroyed something that can never be repaired. But I wanted you to know that I remember the brother who taught me to ride a bike, who shared his Halloween candy with me, who held my hand at Mom's funeral. That brother deserved better than what I became. Take care of yourself. Emily. P.S. I hope you're using the money to help people. Dad always said that's what wealth was for. I kept that letter for months before deciding what to do with it. Part of me wanted to track her down, to try to rebuild something from the wreckage of our relationship. But another part of me knew that some bridges, once burned, can never be fully repaired. Instead, I did something I think our parents would have approved of. I established the Collins Family Foundation, focusing on elder care and family support services. Half the inheritance went into an endowment that provides free legal aid to families navigating end-of-life care, helps pay for home health care for elderly people whose children can't afford it, and offers counseling for families dealing with inheritance disputes. And I set aside $1 million in a trust fund. For Emily. She doesn't know it exists. The money sits in an account managed by a law firm, waiting for her if she ever needs it. For medical emergencies, education, starting over, whatever life might throw at her. Because Judge Foster was right about something else. Our parents didn't raise us to be adversaries. They raised us to be family. And family means that even when someone breaks your heart, even when they betray everything you believed in, even when they steal your inheritance and try to destroy your life, you still leave the door open, just in case they ever want to come home. The inheritance case that tore our family apart has been resolved for years. Emily got what she legally deserved, nothing. I got what I was entitled to, everything. But the real verdict, the one that matters, is still being written. Because forgiveness isn't a legal decision. It's a choice you make every day. And someday, maybe, it's a choice we'll both make together.